Jerry and Charlie riding through the airwaves, bringing you the heat. Come on, pull your fans, now get up out your seat. They're bringing you all things Mets. They're bringing you all things Mets. They're bringing you all things Mets. Now you're listening to Shea Station.
Today is Friday, September 12th. It's the 232nd episode of Shea Station, and it might be the last one as a 2025 playoff team. Our New York Mets are in absolute free fall once again, because this is a thing they do. It's their third 6-game losing streak of the 2025 season, and this one hurts most of all. A 4-game mopping at the hands of the Philadelphia Phillies on their turf, kind of erasing whatever bragging rights you had in this rivalry. The Mets win the season matchup against the Phillies, which is funny, but what's not as funny is the 6 losses in a row, including 2 to the Cincinnati Reds to lose the season tiebreaker, concluding a 3-7 road trip that started 3-1 with a lot of promise. There's so much to say and so little to say at the same time. I'm your host, Jolly Olive. No Jerry Blevins today. Make sure you check out Field of Dreams Whiskey and support our guy down below. A crushing stretch of baseball for the Mets. There are podcasts you can go to that'll give you the rage and the anger. And if that's something you want, I highly suggest checking out the plethora of other shows that are available. A lot of them are very, very good. The way I sort of cope with the Mets losing is I do a lot of maniacal laughing, and I'm in hysterics most of the time, because it feels like every time they do this, they find a new way to do it. And the 2025 team is really finding a way to do it as a collective unit, which you got to really respect. The team chemistry in absolutely sucking in games that matter the most. Realistically, you get one game here, you can fantasize about a split, but coming away from the series with one win would have drastically changed, I think, the tenor of this episode. If they were able to get off the schneid last night and win that game. Of course they didn't. And there were so many moments in this series, and you can point to the run differential and say, really? But there were so many moments in this series that the Mets could have turned the tide and could have begun to play winning baseball, and it really didn't happen. The bats have gone absolutely cold after becoming the best lineup in baseball for like 2 weeks. They've gone absolutely radio silent. The pitching continues to be a disaster by anyone who's not barely old enough to get a beer for the first time in their lives. We're talking about the kids carrying the weight here for the veterans. The bullpen, besides Edwin Diaz, who can't get used because we're never winning ball games, is a brutal watch, top to bottom. And there were tons of managerial decisions this past week that are at best questionable and at worst lost the Mets ball games. So the real question becomes, where do you start with all that? And I think I'm going to start a little bit broader than some people might expect. We'll get into game-specific stuff. We'll go through the painstaking detail if you really want that. But there's a sort of realization that I'm coming to about the Steve Cohen Era Mets. And if you listen to the episode we had where Wardy came on to fill in for Jerry, he kind of made this point as well, and it's really stuck in my mind ever since he said it. The Steve Cohen Era Mets cannot seem to win ball games when there are expectations placed on them. And that kind of varies in what I mean by it. In 2021, Steve takes over the team. He overhauls the coaching staff. He trades for and extends Francisco Lindor, and naturally there are high expectations placed because realistically before that there were no expectations on the Mets to be a competitive ball club, especially after their miserable 2020 season. They are in first place all the way until August 13th of that season before completely choking and finishing with a losing record. So, by proxy, the next season, although they do make a flurry of signings, including the Max Scherzer signing and a couple signings for veterans like Canna and Escobar, That season, I would say, had considerably less expectations just because the Mets kind of demonstrated their DNA from a year prior. Instead, it becomes this miracle 100-win season. Buck Showalter becomes the key. By the way, just because we're on the topic of it, if you see people or hear your buddy comparing this team to this 2022 team, slap them right in the face. I know that team busted out and got swept at the last possible moment, and it was absolutely gut-wrenching. That team went 15-11 in September. They were winning baseball games until the very, very, very end of the season where they decided to become a shell of themselves. But I think it's just because they ran out of gas. I think this was a talented team that ran out of gas, but that's beside the point. That's 3 years removed. You can have a little bit more wisdom than your reactions in the moment. Point blank, that team wins a bunch of ball games because there were, I think, less expectations set on them. The Mets had kind of become less sexy from their 2021 season. So 2023, sky's the limit. Talking baseball, power ranks the Mets as the number 2 team. Everyone's placing World Series bets. This is the squad. They bring in Justin Verlander. They sign Senga. They make all these moves. And that team never even came to the party. Never even came to the party. They sell at that deadline. They never got off the ground that year. And then 2024, there weren't a lot of expectations going into the year. They had some questionable pitching signings. And then they start terribly. So whatever expectations were there are gone. And then, of course, we have that miracle run with, JD Martinez's veteran wisdom and Jose Iglesias is the pop star and Grimace and Mendoza finds his footing and Alonso hits and all that stuff. And it took plenty of magic and miracles to make that team what it was, but they were that team and you can't take that away from them. What happens after that? They make it to the NLCS, sky high expectations for this year. They start hot and look what they're doing again. They are falling apart. So it's almost like a vicious cyclical nature of falling short of expectations, and then once expectations are gone, okay, we are this team actually, guys. We were just kidding. And they really are doing it again, and they're doing it in a new way, in a new, painful way. They're 31-46. That is the 3rd worst record in baseball, and that's over 2 months worth of games. They have been one of the worst teams in baseball for over 2 calendar months. And they had such a lead that only now is everyone realizing, oh, the Mets are bad. The Mets are a tough watch. They don't do the right things fundamentally on the baseball field. They can't get a starting pitcher to go beyond 5 innings. Now everyone's noticing because your playoff bid, which, let's be real, this Mets team does not look like a playoff team. If they manage to make it by some miracle, they might get steamrolled in the first round. It might be embarrassing on national TV. Playoff teams don't lose 6 games in a row 3 times in 1 year. I would love if someone could pull that side. I might pull it myself after the show. Has a playoff team ever lost 6 games in a row 3 times in 1 season? Because I don't think that's ever happened. Point blank, teams are aware now that the Mets are dead in the water, ready to be eaten, and they got teams on their heels looking to take that spot. And it's just such a shame. It's such a shame because the Mets fan in me, the weirdest, biggest thing screaming at me is that we wasted a year of the Braves being bad. They're like so not relevant to everything that's going horribly for us right now. But we wasted a year of the first losing season for the Braves since 2017. Almost 10 years ago, we wasted that season, potentially. The Reds and Giants are a game and a half behind the Mets in the wildcard standings with 15 to play. Realistically, the Reds are even closer than that because they own the tiebreaker over the Mets. The Reds' remaining schedule, and I know Mets fans know best, don't play the strength of schedule game, but my goodness, the Reds have 3 in Las Vegas. They've been playing, or not Las Vegas, Sacramento. They've been playing better ball lately too, but then 3 against the Pirates, 3 on the road against St. Louis, who I think they're a better team than. They're going to play 3 in Milwaukee, but that's the last series of the season. Milwaukee probably would have clinched 2 like tomorrow. It's just, it's brutal to look at. Meanwhile, the Giants have 7 games versus the Dodgers, so keep your eye on that. Point blank, the Mets need to be preying on other teams' downfalls because they can't seem to win a ball game themselves. They can't seem to help themselves. And really, the game that still bothers me the most, and last night was tough. Last night was brutal, but honestly, you feel like you could see it coming from a mile away if you've watched enough Mets baseball. The game that still bothers me is Game 1 of this series, a game that I think could have changed the entire momentum of this series had the Mets won it. It's so important to win the opener in these long road series, and the Mets are in their third set of a long road trip. It was so important to try and get that game, and they got a good pitching performance because Nolan McLean is one of the 3 pitchers on this staff that you can actually trust to try and get outs in the 6th inning and try and actually go after hitters and not nibble and play to contact constantly. One with cojones. I'll say it. I'll be a little old-fashioned. It's tough to watch David Peterson and Clay Holmes starts this deep into the season. The numbers are good, and you know what? Peterson, I thought, looked fine last night outside of that horrible last inning there, or I think it was the 3rd inning. But the fact that you have to rely on these kids to give you competitive outings is brutal. But Nolan McLean gave you that. 5 1/3, 1 earned run, 10 base runners through 7 hits and 3 walks, and still managed to avoid colossal damage. The Mets have something really special there. And Nolan McLean, he is the diamond in the rough of what's been a shit sandwich at the end of the year for us. And then on the other side, you have Aaron Nola, who has an ERA over 9 since mid-May, a guy that you've beaten this year. A guy that you know if he's not absolutely dotting his fastball, he's mincemeat at this point in his career. Unfortunately, because Nola has been one of the better pitchers of the past decade, and this downturn has been swift for him. But you got to take advantage of that because what's on the horizon is the 3-headed monster of lefties that the Phillies have in their rotation. Ranger Suarez, Christopher Sanchez, and Jesus Luzardo. And the Mets allow him. I won't even say that he did it himself. He pitched well, but the Mets allowed him to go 6 scoreless in this game. And the Phillies are not like the Phillies of old. They have this back end of the bullpen that's pretty ironclad now. You know, they have David Robertson, who, by the way, you could have signed. Any team could have signed with 6 weeks remaining in the season for league minimum. He's their 7th inning guy now, and he's nails. I know Vientos got him in one of these games, but like that was a bad pitch. And like I think we've watched David Robertson pitch for decent enough ball games in a Mets uniform. You know that he's better than that, and he showed it. You have him. You have Yohan Duran at the back end now, which I do think is a trade really only the Phillies would make at this point because that's Dave Dombrowski GM. Like I'm trying to win a World Series, which you know what? It's admirable. I've seen a lot of bad Mets trade deadlines. It would have been cool to have a good one. You have him at the back end. Matt Strom's been nails for them. Orion Kerkering, who I know the Mets have gotten before, but he's also a good pitcher. Like, if you can't get anything going against this Phillies rotation, which it is good, but like, Aaron Nola goes 6 scoreless. The Mets offense goes dead silent. It was the first time the Mets got shut out at Citizens Bank Park in over a decade. And you kept the Phillies offense at bay for 1 run and you lost the game. I saw a lot of people clipping that Alvarez at bat. I mean, that's just a microcosm of everything that was wrong in this game. It was a horrible at bat. But that leads us to managerial decision number 1, which I had beef with. Luis Angel Acuna is not a name that I should be saying as much as I'm going to in this podcast. I don't know exactly what changed over the past 2 weeks, but you know, this was a fringe quadruple A player who was getting called up as the 27th man for doubleheaders to be a defensive and base running substitute, which is a role he can fill very well. Luis Angel Acuna has those tools. The tool that he does not yet have in his major league career and could develop one day, but right now at this juncture does not have, is the ability to put together a quality at bat. We've seen flashes of it. I recall 10 pitch at bats. I remember the first series of the year with Houston. He had a very clutch 12 pitch at bat. It's in there, but not right now. And that's fine. That's not what the Mets need him for. They need him to be a tools player off the bench. Yet for some reason in this game, Luis Angel Acuna is getting pinch hitting opportunities for Cedric Mullins, who's a big league bat that you acquire. And I know he's been terrible, but I still would rather see Cedric Mullins taking that bat than Luis Angel Acuna. There's no advantage to that in my mind other than a righty-lefty switch, which, by the way, Mullins has better numbers against left-handed pitching, and he hasn't played against a lefty in a Mets uniform, at least to my eyes, watching the screen. Acuna gets the at-bat. He pops out. Then you get to the ninth inning. Alonso gets on. First pitch against Yohan Duran. Instant momentum. It's like, remember what happened the last time Yohan Duran faced the Mets? 4 straight hits to walk off the game. And then Alonso gets you started immediately with the first pitch single. And the feeling in my chest was, as a Mets fan, was like, oh, we have a chance to come back and win this game. They let it stay 1-0. They didn't tack on more. We've already beaten this closer. Let's do it again. Let's make some magic. Wouldn't that be a really good opportunity to use Luis Angel Acuna as a pinch runner and have him, I don't know, steal a base or something? Instead, the best device left on the Mets bench is Ronnie Mauricio, who doesn't run well because he tore his ACL. He also doesn't really have base running IQ. So when Mark Vientos slashes one down the line that is a surefire double to anyone watching the ball leave the bat, Mauricio doesn't get a good read and only gets to third base because he's not fast. So what could have been a game-tying double, and who knows what happens in extra innings? Away teams win extra inning games more than home teams. Instead, it's second and third with one out. And I knew as soon as the Mets didn't punch their ticket right there, they're going to lose the game. Because situational hitting has been atrocious for this team all season long. And what do you know? Back-to-back strikeouts. Now, I understand that Yohan Duran is throwing 102 at your throat. I get it. He's one of the toughest closers to face in the game. But you also have your best contact hitter in your lineup in Jeff McNeil up to bat. So as soon as you lose that matchup, it's over. And the Mets lose this game 1-0. And that kind of just set the tone for this entire series. Game 2, Ranger Suarez has the start of his life, and Harrison Bader has a 3-hit day. He's hitting 600 against the Mets this year, who, by the way, is another guy you could have acquired at the deadline if you wanted a center fielder. Now, I'm not even going to try and play revisionist history here. Bader was not a guy on my radar that I said the Mets need to go out and get him. But imagine rekindling 2024 magic. I don't know. It could have been something. Instead, it's nothing. Instead, it's a detriment to the Mets season because now he's playing against you and his hair's on fire. This one was over before it started. Sean Manaea looked awful in the first 2 innings. He got basically a motivational speech by Carlos Mendoza in the dugout and then went out and gave you 5, which I'm going to be real. I was surprised by. And now he's slated to make his next start. So that's great. We'll see another punt outing there. His starts have been terrible and it sucks because you invested $75 million in this guy and his first year is basically a wash of this new contract. And I think it's a contract that a lot of Mets fans were excited for, including myself. And you just have not been able to count on him all season long. And it sucks because Manaea is one of the best character guys in the dugout. You know, the clips of him earlier in the season singing in the dugout, doing the thumbs down at Yankee Stadium. Like, he's a guy you want to root for, but at this juncture, he is uncompetitive every time he takes the mound. 3-8 are the Mets when Sean Manaea pitches this year. He has not completed 6 innings this year. He's allowed 2 or more home runs in 3 of his last 5 outings. And he doesn't even have the Kodai Senga case where his body language is, confused and he doesn't know what's wrong. He accepts this minor league option. Sean Manaea is hanging his head because I'm assuming he feels healthy and he just can't seem to get anybody out. But, he gives you 5 after basically saying, F it, I'm just going to throw as hard as I can and throw caution to the wind. Great. This is, I think, probably the rantiest podcast I'll ever put together because it's just so frustrating. Justin Hagenman comes in this game for mop-up duties. Bear in mind, this is still a 4-1 game. This is the game where Vientos tags Robertson for the solo shots here. In the 7th inning, it's 4-1. Hagenman's already given you 2 innings of mop-up duty. A 3-run game is what I consider close. It's save eligibility, so I consider that a close game. Hagenman's still in the game. Gets 2 of the first 3 batters out in the 7th inning. Bader, of course, singles because that's all he does. And the lefty, Kyle Schwarber, comes up. And the crowd's on their feet. And Schwarber hasn't gotten you yet, but you almost feel like he's due for any moment. And it's almost like Mendoza did not have a plan for this situation. So Hagenman stays, 40, 50 pitches deep into his outing, facing the best left-handed power hitter in the National League. What do you think happened? Schwarber hits his 50th home run. Tips the cap to the crowd, standing ovation. The vibes are unbelievably high in Philadelphia, and you could have avoided that by basically using any other pitcher in your bullpen besides Ryan Stanek or Reed Garrett, really, because those are home run susceptible guys. So that game goes by the wayside. A couple very questionable managing decisions there. the lineup construction in this series. So Jose Siri comes back and he gets some run. Fine, whatever. Why does Brett Baty play none of this series? Brett Baty has been demonstrably one of the better defensive players on this team, but also he's been hitting in the month of September, which you can't say for most of the guys in this lineup. He's 7 for 20. So he's hitting .350 since September 2nd. He's got 2 extra base hits and a walk and a stolen base in that window of 7 games. Productive player. Luis Angel Acuna starts over him. Mark Vientos plays third base instead of DHing over him, so you can get Starling Marte at bats, who's been ice cold. It makes no sense to me. I don't know why now is the point in time where Mendoza is trying to get guys like Acuna and Mauricio looks. I understand trying to switch up the juju of this lineup, but at a certain point, not getting consistent playing time, I think, is really messing with some of the players on this roster. And I really had hope. I think I said this in a podcast like a month ago that I was okay with guys coming in and out and playing for 2 days and then sitting for 2 days and moving position around, whatever, as long as the Mets had an end goal in mind of finding whatever that best lineup was. And it seems to me that the best makeup of this team had Brett Baty included, had Jeff McNeil not exactly playing center field on a day-to-day basis, and we saw that burn the Mets in the final game of the series. I know that the Tyrone Taylor injury sucks because he was catching fire and playing really good D in center field, and that solved a lot of problems. But at the end of the day, the Luis Angel Acuna of September 2024 is not here. The guy that, hit slashing 800 OPS to fill in for Lindor for 15 games. That guy's not here right now. And as much as you want to force that, these are as close to must-win games as it possibly gets for the New York Mets. And you can't afford to be giving away at-bats like this. The Mets get their shit rocked in Game 3, 11-3. The Phillies run up the score on the bullpen again. And that leads to the final game. Game 4 of this miserable series. Jesus Luzardo on the bump, who always dominates the Mets. Always. His track record against the Mets is near impeccable. And he is a vicious dog on the mound. He has that killer look that, if he was on my team, I think I'd love him. And it makes my skin crawl that the Phillies traded, a borderline nothing to get him. Starlin Caba, the best prospect that the Phillies traded in that deal, is a guy that the Marlins already look like they're giving up on. And they got, who would be probably the best starter by WAR in the Mets rotation this season if Jesus Luzardo was on this team. Whatever. Besides the point. The Mets rock him in the first inning. It felt like the urgency had suddenly returned. Lindor singles after a good at-bat. Lindor had a tough series. He was swinging at borderline pitches, not working counts. He gets to 2-1 against Luzardo, gets the pitch to hit, takes it the other way. That was a really good sign to me of like, okay, he's coming out of it a little bit. Maybe that wasn't an at-bat where he looked like he was pressing. Soto, who we haven't mentioned yet, basically the only guy to show up in this series, follows with a knock as well. They pull off the double steal with ease. Real Muto spikes the throw. It almost goes into left field. Alonso strikes out, but then 3 consecutive knocks. Vientos gets a knock, which was great because if that went, he was in a 2-strike count. If he strikes out there, the Mets probably walk away with nothing. He singles. Nimmo gets a knock. He needed one badly. And then Marte, who I really didn't want to start in this game because he's been so bad and clogging up the DH spot, gets a double, a huge hit. Mets open up a 4-0 lead. They have 5 hits in their first 6 batters. McNeil smokes one up the middle, and Luzardo, it just finds his glove, and he turns 2 on it, and it ends the inning. 4-0 is your score after 1 inning. And I do think back to that McNeil liner of like, that probably should have went up the middle and been a 5th run. Whatever. Peterson comes out looking impressive. Strikes out 3 guys in the 3rd inning. So he's cruising. It's the top of the 4th. And this is when it clicked for me that things were going to go badly. I didn't have the Mets blowing it as quickly as they did, but the bad feeling, I don't want to say I saw this coming, but the bad feeling returned when in that 4th inning, it's the top of the Mets order again, or it was in the 3rd inning, excuse me. Soto, Alonso, Vientos go down 1-2-3. Then Nimmo, Marte, McNeil go down 1-2-3. That's the 3rd and the 4th inning. And suddenly, in the blink of an eye, Luzardo has recorded 11 outs in a row after giving up 5 hits and 6 batters. And to my eye, he's not doing things all that differently. It kind of feels like the Mets got themselves a lead and dusted off their hands and said, job finished. Job well done. Those were what those at-bats looked like. They looked lazy. They looked defeated. They looked checked out. And that's obviously a fan saying that to professionals who do it day to day for a living. But my God, it's one thing to not tack on to your 4-0 lead in a game that, again, is as close to must win as it possibly gets. The Reds and Giants are off. They have no ability to make up ground on you in the wildcard standings. If you win this game, you gain a half game for free. You can't tack on after a 4-0 lead in the first inning. It almost felt like a comeback was cemented in stone. And so it was, because David Peterson, again, just cannot seem to hit his spots the way he was doing a month ago. It's his career high in innings pitched. And Otto Kemp is the guy that gets him for that 2-run homer. And that, I think, is a huge turning point in this game, because you let Nick Castellanos draw a walk before that. A guy that has little to no plate discipline, who almost certainly will be gone from the Phillies next year. And you let him work an 8-pitch at bat to get on base. Brutal. Peterson strikes out the next 2 batters. The Phillies get 1 more run in the 5th inning. We go to the 6th inning. So Mendoza, I agree with him lifting Peterson after 5, because it was tough towards the end, and I think you hang your hat on that because Peterson hasn't had great starts lately. 5 innings, 3 earned runs. Again, not good, but competitive enough for the Mets to win a ball game. 6th inning comes. It's Soto, Alonso, Vientos. The Mets haven't had a base runner since the 1st inning. They've made 14 outs in a row. And Luzardo has to throw 9 pitches to get through the heart of the Mets order. 9. By the way, the Mets lineup is giving up 2 free outs because they're starting Luis Angel Acuna again. And Hayden Sanger has to play because Francisco Alvarez has played 4 days in a row with a broken pinky and a torn ligament in his thumb. Sanger had to play. I get that. But you can't play Brett Beatty against Jesus Luzardo? You can't play Brett against a lefty ever. Is that what you're telling me? You can't do it. You can't improve your defense marginally by having Brett play 3rd, Mark DH, play Jeff at 2nd, and play one of your 2 capable center fielders in center field. You can't do that. Nope, because Brett can't play against a lefty. Okay, fine. 6th inning rolls around. Reed Garrett, who has not looked great since returning from shoulder inflammation, gets the ball. Jeff McNeil is still in center field. It's one thing to play McNeil in center when you have Peterson on the mound, who is a strikeout ground ball pitcher. That is something you can rely on. It's one thing to play Jeff in center in those games to squeeze in an extra bat. I get that. I honestly think that's not greedy, because McNeil has displayed enough of a capability to play center field this year to the point where I think I can trust him out there to make the routine catches. When Reed Garrett comes into the game, whether you like it or not, whether it's what you've drawn up for Reed Garrett in the 2025 season, he is a fly ball pitcher. His splitter doesn't get low enough. The fastball is not beating anybody. And this Phillies lineup can lift the ball. Even the guys at the back end of the order can lift the ball. So it's not a good matchup to have Jeff McNeil out in center field in what is a very wide center field at Citizens Bank Park. The corners are a different story. But that's a lot of ground to cover. And you have Jose Siri, who's played the past 2 days. Sure, fine, give him a day. But Cedric Mullins is also on the bench. Press the buttons. Use your pieces in the right way. It felt like Mendoza got the bench involved so much in the series, but never in positions where they could succeed. It was just being used for the sake of getting a different body in a different situation, and that's not always the best way to manage these guys. Again, this is Monday morning quarterbacking. I get it. It's a tough gig. And I'm not saying that I would have done a better job, but it's infuriating to watch these decisions unfold in real time. When you have such a deep bench at this point in the year, you have 28 guys on your roster. You have options. McNeil stays out in center. He doesn't get a great read on the Castellanos double to lead it off. Takes a bad route. Castellanos not a fast guy. Legs out the double. Then Otto Kemp hits a pretty well-struck ball to center field, and McNeil breaks in first, And by then, the ball has already beat him. It's way over his head. The Phillies tie the game. And then Reed Garrett, who has displayed a proficiency for completely unraveling when things don't go exactly his way, especially in high leverage spots, which any game in September I consider a high leverage spot. Garrett unfolds. He walks Brandon Marsh. And then with 2 outs and 2 on, who comes up? Of course, it's Harrison Bader. Of course. And again, I'm not saying the Mets should have gone out and got Harrison Bader on the trade deadline. It would have been dope, but I'm not saying that like that's what they should have done. I'm not saying with hindsight, yeah, that was the best move, because there were plenty of good players available at the deadline. It's just so perfect that he became a Philly. He looks like a Philly, by the way. He looks like such a Philly, way more than he ever looked like a Met. And he's the guy that's killing you offensively, killing you. The Phillies acquired him because they could not afford to play Yohan Rojas anymore because he was so bad. And now they have this beautiful platoon with Bader and Marsh. Beautiful. Couldn't have drawn it up better. Shout out Dave Dombrowski. Killed the trade deadline again. Something the Mets can never seem to do. Because even when they acquire high leverage relievers like Ryan Helsley, they explode upon arrival. And Cedric Mullins is over his last 30. Sure. Why not? Tack that on. The Phillies take the lead 6-4, and what do you know? The Mets are still asleep. They're still asleep. All 9 of the last at-bats go down in order, including 7 strikeouts. These guys are facing Luzardo for the 3rd, 4th time, and they're still striking out. Luzardo, I think, becomes the first pitcher ever to give up 4 in the first inning and still go 8. Maybe not ever. I'm sure they were doing that back in the live ball era or whatever. Mendoza finally used Edwin Diaz in this game. That's great. Tyler Rogers and Edwin Diaz give you 6 up, 6 down to end the game. Awesome. Glad we could use those guys in spots that matter. And the Mets lose 6-4. The Phillies are going to be your NL East champions again. A year where the Braves were dormant. The Mets failed to capitalize on any division hopes they had. They blow the division lead again. They win the head-to-head on Philly on the year, 8-7. Which is funny. Or did they go 7-7? No, 7-6. That's the number. Really good podcasting here, brother. And they lose that series in gut-wrenching fashion. And I have to hear after every single one of these stupid, painful losses about how talented the team is. The talent in the room. The talent is undeniable. I'm not going to say that I'm worried, but we don't have too much time, says Carlos Mendoza. It sucks. I mean, it's not as bad as Pete Alonso telling us to just smile in 2021. Just smile and enjoy the ride. We got this. When they got swept at Philadelphia, coincidentally. Oh, my God. So where do you go from here? Where do you go with this team from here? Because guess what? The rest of this schedule is miserable. It is miserable. If you are a creative Mets fan and you have enough of the lore in your brain, you can surmise what is going to happen in these next 15 games. Because first up, almost perfectly, is the return of Jacob deGrom to Citi Field with the Texas Rangers, who are one of the hottest teams in baseball, and they're doing it with a bunch of minor league quadruple A guys who come out of nowhere to resurrect a team that lost its 2 best players, Seager and Semien. You have Matthew Hellman, who's 29 years old, breaking out. You have Rowdy Tellez, who's slugging bombs. Jake Berger, who was demoted earlier in the year. These are the guys run producing for these Rangers. And they have one of the best pitching staffs in baseball. They might walk into Citi Field and absolutely steamroll the Mets. I'm going tonight. I don't know why, but I am. I'm going tonight, and I'm going to get to see Jacob deGrom versus Jonah Tong in what's probably going to be my last Mets game of the year. And I just hope to God that Jonah Tong can keep up, because Jacob deGrom is going to make mincemeat of this lineup. Patrick Corbin against Brandon Sproat in game 2. I hope that you can beat Patrick Corbin. I've seen you guys do it so many times. Please. I have to believe his better years just because he's faced a bunch of American League teams he's never played before. But I don't know. Brandon Sproat pitches in that game. And then Jacob Latz versus Nolan McLean in game 3. So, Eureka. I get to potentially see 3 good starting pitching performances because they're all going to be made by guys that are 24 years old or younger. I mean, my God. Isn't that crazy that you see 3 rookies in the probables from the Mets and you go, phew, thank God. Thank God none of our veterans who are getting paid millions of dollars are pitching in this pivotal series because I don't want to see them pitch. I want to see the guy that's been up for a month pitch. I trust him more. Like if the Mets by some miracle still make the playoffs, is that your 1, 2, 3? Is it McLean, Tong, and Sproat? Because I'm not sure if I want to see David Peterson make a playoff start. I definitely don't want to see Clay Holmes make a playoff start. And I think the Mets are out of their mind if they give Sean Manaea a ball in October. But it doesn't matter because right now it doesn't really feel like the Mets are going to be making October baseball. But that's not why I started this. Because after the Texas series, the Mets host the Padres, who have already swept them this year, who, whenever the Padres come to Citi Field, you just get terrible memories of 2022. And they seem like they're playing much better survival baseball right now than the New York Mets are. They're at the very least getting good pitching performances. They also can't hit. But you know what's the best remedy for a team that can't hit? Facing the Mets pitching staff. So I'm really excited to watch that one. Then you play the Washington Nationals, who are in last place, and you think, oh, good, we'll get a respite there. The Mets lost the series to the Nationals less than a month ago. Less than a month ago. Sure, it was on the road, and the Mets never seem to win ball games on the road. But less than a month ago, the last place Nationals took a series from you. Then you go on the road for the final 6 games. You go to Wrigley first. I'm going to be at one of those games. Hopefully the Mets still have a winning record by then. And this is perfect. Who is the guy on the Cubs that was carrying them for half the season and has suddenly gone dormant and everyone's asking questions of, oh no, is this guy not for real? Can we trust him? Is he going to come through in the big moments? It's PCA. It's the Mets trade away guy. Maybe I'm being hysterical here, but doesn't it just kind of feel like PCA will have some sort of redemption series when the Mets come to town? I certainly feel that way. But the cherry on top, the absolute cherry on top of the shit sandwich of the shit birthday cake that we've been dealt by the New York Mets once again is the fact that they go to Miami to end the year. They play the Marlins in the last game of the season. In a season where they're choking away a playoff spot in the last month of the year, just like they did in 2007. Who is up to deck for that last series of the year, ready to play spoiler and crush the dreams? It is the Marlins. Assuming the Mets even get to that series still within a shot to make the playoffs, which, by the way, the Fangraphs playoff predictions, they're pissing me off. Don't piss me off. They are pissing me off. Hang on, let me find this. 2025 playoff odds. You're telling me the Mets, with no tiebreaker over the Reds, with a 1.5 game lead over against the Reds and the Giants, and I just mentioned the Reds' schedule before, you're telling me that this team still has a 78.3% chance to make the playoffs? You're lying. Where can I bet against this? I would love to. It cannot be as high as that. 50 seems too high. 40 might seem too high. 78.3, you're lying. Don't piss me off. You're pissing me off right now. Oh my God. This is very therapeutic for me. I'm hoping this is a good listen. I have no idea if it is. So, looking at a broader sight of this squad, because I don't want to do off-season talk yet. I'm not. The team's 5 games over 500 with 15 to play. They're in a playoff spot, but it sort of behooves me to start thinking about the offseason, which is just really apparent to the psyche of the Met fan. There's not so much that can change with this team. You have a lot of guys that are under contract. McNeil is under contract. Lindor, obviously. Vientos under team control. Nimmo, obviously. Soto, obviously, under team control. Beatty, Alvarez. You go to the pitching staff. Holmes has another year. Peterson still under team control. Senga has the option. Like, there's not going to be a ton of turnover with this roster. The biggest points of turnover are Edwin Diaz possibly opting out, which would be awful because you have one reliever you can trust. Like, imagine this season without Edwin Diaz on the roster. It'd be like 2023. Anyways. Marte's contract is expiring, and I don't think he's coming back. Although, really nice last year for the Mets. Alonso has the opt-out as well. So those are the biggest three, points of turnover. And as I started the show with, this is a Mets roster that has largely stayed the same in the 2020s in terms of core players. You're talking about Lindor and McNeil and Nimmo and Alonso and some of the guys in the pitching staff, Peterson. And you're entering year 5 of this, and this team and roster has consistently displayed in their DNA that they don't seem to respond to adversity well, and they need basically magic to pull out of a hat to escape some of these situations. I mean, realistically, you're talking about the 2024 Mets being the biggest success of the Cohen era, and it took 2 absolute miracle home runs and a miracle rainstorm in Atlanta, bear in mind as well. 3 miracles to get that team where they were. And you know what? They won that NLDS in convincing fashion. They were the better team in that series. But outside of that, it's been a lot of just relying on grimace and rallying cries and miracle home runs. And you know what? The other side of that is also a coaching staff that was outcoached by JD Martinez last year. Like the disappearance or the absence of JD Martinez on this year's team is felt, not performance-wise by him, but I think by the wisdom that he imparted on some of these players, specifically Mark Vientos, who disappeared for 3 months this year. I think personnel is the biggest point of overhauling that's going to happen if this team doesn't make the playoffs. And a lot of people, I think Mendoza's getting fired. I don't know if that's true. I really would be surprised if Carlos Mendoza was out the door. Although I do think he's had a really bad week. I don't think that he's lost his clubhouse completely. I think it's more a matter of a lot of the guys left over from before Cohen was even in control of the team. That might be embellishing, but from Buck Showalter's coaching staff and Luis Rojas' coaching staff, there are still guys from those staffs that are still here. And I just think that is where the biggest point of turnaround is going to come. And maybe it's with some of the players too. Like we got to start thinking about Alonso's stuff again pretty soon once this season's over. But something has to change. Something has to change with the philosophy of this team. Something needs to change in the leadership of this team, because you have a bunch of guys in this locker room that are not the de facto leader. Some of them lead by example, but none of them are the outspoken clubhouse leader like the Phillies have with a guy like Harper, and like the Yankees have with a guy like Judge. The Mets don't have that. It's not Alonso. I think Lindor is a quieter leadership figure, but there's no C on his chest, and there probably won't be anytime soon after this season. And Soto's still new. Like it's not going to be him either. So the Mets, if it's not Mendoza, don't have that in the room right now. And it's very clear that they need that. They need a rallying cry of some kind. They need a bullshit closed door meeting to get their feet off the ground. And what's got to change outside of that is the way that David Stearns runs this team. David Stearns did an incredible job of winning on the margins this year. He found hundreds of innings from names like Brandon Waddell and Justin Hagenman and Chris Davinsky and Jose Castillo and Rico Garcia and Kevin Herget and Justin Garza. Names that are not on any opening day roster, but got plenty of run here and performed well. And Griffin Canning, throw that in there too. But you are not the GM of the Brewers anymore. Sure, this is something you can do, and it's very helpful to this team to have the bullpen depth that they did, but you do not need to operate this franchise on the margins anymore. I mean, I don't want to be that guy, but I'm going to be that guy for a second. Last year, Luis Severino gave you 182 innings. It wasn't all pretty, especially down the stretch, but he gave you 182 innings. And there's not a Mets pitcher on the staff this year that's going to sniff that total. Peterson's at 162. I doubt that he gives you 18 more this year. I doubt it. You had 2 guys do that in Minaya. They brought back 1. I'm just saying, I think that there's some traditional baseball wisdom that was missing from the philosophy of the Mets offseason. Giving Frankie Montas near $40 million was insane. Of course, I was head over heels for the Sean Manaea 3-year $75, but it's bad process. It just sucks, man. It just sucks that this team is where they are with the lineup that they have, with the pitching that they displayed they were capable of earlier in the year. It just sucks that this is where they are. There were big fish out there to get. They were in play for Crochet. People forget that they were the runner-up for Garrett Crochet. He was out there. That is a trade and extend candidate that the Red Sox are riding to a wild card spot. And the Mets don't have that horse. They have to trust a bunch of 24-year-olds to get the starting pitching done. I'm hoping that we see a big offseason of change no matter what happens with this team. If by some stretch of a miracle, this team rattles off even a winning record in their last 15 games, even a win, which, by the way, let's just do some quick math here. If the Mets by some miracle go 8-7 in their last 15, which doesn't sound like a big ask, but if you've been watching this team, that is a big ask. If they go 8-7, they finish 84-78. I don't think that's a playoff record. Do you? You don't think the Reds can get there? I think the Reds can get there. So then you're talking about going 10-5 in your last 15, which gets you to 86 wins, which we all thought was like, yeah, that's a safe floor for this team with Juan Soto on it. I mean, it's just ridiculous, man. Whether we like it or not, change is coming, and I think a lot of Mets fans will like it by some stretch of the imagination. I got to stop saying that. Oh, man, am I out of gas? What am I at here? 48 minutes? I think I'm out of gas. Hopefully this was therapeutic for you in a way, listening along, because I needed a good rant. Hopefully we can come back on Monday with a series win, and I can be delusional again. Because you know what? When they went up 4-0 in the first, and then they Peterson pitched 3 clean innings, I was like, oh yeah, this team is really talented. Alonso was right. Like, the talent in this room is undeniable. And I think, to close the show, that is the worst part about all of this, is that the post-game quotes that I think are driving everybody insane are accurate. This team is incredibly talented. You're going to get a 40-40 season from Juan Soto in his first year. Lindor's going to go 30-30. Alonso is going to probably pass 120 RBI this year. Brandon Nimmo is giving you yet another 3-WAR season. For all that has been wrong with David Peterson the last 2 months, he's still giving you 170 innings of a 1.10 ERA plus, which I think you take to the bank. Edwin Diaz is the best closer in baseball, and you have 3 rookies that are capable of giving you quality starts every time they pitch. The talent on this roster is undeniable, and yet they still stink. They suck. They can't beat a winning team. They can't go on the road and win a ball game. They just shrink. I don't know how you fix this, because it's not like a lot of the personnel is going to change, like I mentioned before. They're just showing that they're losers. Ugh, God. I think that's all I got. Go out there and win a couple ball games against this Ranger series is your best shot to win a series, I think, for the next 2 weeks. Because I don't think it lines up again that you have Sproat, McLean, and Tong for 3 games. I could be wrong about that, but with off days and the 6-man, I'm not sure it lines up again. This is your best shot to win a series, and they play good ball at home. Maybe they're cheating at home. Who the hell knows? Go out there and win a goddamn series against the hottest team in baseball. Because until you do that, or win a series point blank in general, it's hard for any Mets fan to sell this team as a playoff team. And the craziest part of all is that if they do limp in and somehow make it, they're going to play the Dodgers, who are ice cold, who can't buy a win right now, except against the Rockies. And then if they win that, they play the Phils, who I know they just got stomped by, but they beat them in a playoff series last year. They still have a winning head-to-head on them this year. Like, the Mets' path is there. It was in front of them, and they are kicking it to the curb. It's insanely frustrating, and it's frustrating to the point where all you can do is laugh, which is why I've laughed a lot on this show. I feel like a fucking maniac right now. Thank you so much for listening to the show. If you enjoyed it, if you're watching on YouTube, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff. In such bad times, we need some good stuff. If you're listening on a podcast app, Spotify, Google, drop us a rating, drop us a review, as per the words of Mark Luino on Metsed Up. Stole that from him. keep your head high. Check on your other Mets fan friends. Go to a game because who knows, they might win, and that might be the last win you see this year. And despite my energy in this episode, LFGM, let's go Mets. I'm still going to watch. I'm still going to sit there for 2.5 hours and watch because I still love you, even though you're pissing me the hell off. Don't piss me off. You're pissing me off. LFGM. 2 more weeks, 15 more games.
Shay Station. Jerry and Charlie. Shay Station. Jerry and Charlie. Thank you all for coming. Hope you enjoyed the show. We will see you next time where we'll be back.
Station.